For a few hours, he was worth $14.2 million. The bets were legal. The odds were right there in black and white, and they took the wagers without blinking. But the golf tournament ended early. That's when $14.2 million disappeared. If you've ever placed a bet online, some nights the money feels imaginary. It lives on a screen. It moves in numbers. It climbs in the quiet glow of a phone held too close to your face while the rest of the house sleeps. You tap, you wait, you refresh. The world doesn't look any different, but somewhere in the circuitry, a balance shifts. And sometimes it shifts by $14.2 million. That's the kind of number that doesn't belong in polite conversation. It belongs in a courtroom, or a country song, or a lawsuit filed in the state of Iowa. This story starts the way most gambling stories do now. Not with cigar smoke or a velvet rope, but with a man at home scrolling through an app. A golf tournament on television. A long-shot parlay built the way people build castles in the sand, one bucket at a time, hoping the tide stays kind. The man's name was kept plain in the filings, the way legal documents sand down the edges of a personality. Just an Iowa bettor, a regular customer of DraftKings. Nothing theatrical, not a high roller with a tailored suit and a host on speed dial. Just a man with a hunch and a screen. He built a series of golf parlays tied to a professional tournament, the 2024 AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, where the Pacific weather can turn on you without asking. A parlay, for folks who don't spend weekends staring at odds boards, is a string of outcomes linked together. Every leg has to hit. Miss one, and the whole thing folds up like a cheap lawn chair. He picked his golfers, multiple outcomes, the kind of odds that sit there looking harmless until you multiply them together and realize you've built something enormous. The total stake was a few $100s, nothing reckless, nothing outrageous, and for a stretch of time it worked. The tournament kept moving, one hole at a time. Golf has a slow heartbeat. It unfolds over 4 days, usually 72 holes, Thursday through Sunday, and somewhere along the way, the pieces of this man's parlay started falling into place. One golfer holds position. Another survives the cut. Another climbs the board. By Sunday morning, the bets, originally long shots, had become something else entirely. Across several tickets, the potential payout showed up in bold numbers inside the app. $14.2 million. $14 million and a little extra. I've seen people get lightheaded over a free buffet. $14 million will make you sit down. Now, here's where weather enters like an uninvited guest. Storm systems rolled in. Rain, lightning in the area. Delays stretched. Golf courses, for all their manicured politeness, are defenseless against a thunderhead. Officials paused play. They waited, checked radar, walked fairways with hands on hips. Eventually, tournament officials shortened the event. Instead of the full 72 holes, it would end early, 54 holes completed. The leaders crowned, trophies handed out, cameras packed up. And that's when the app balance changed. The bet was voided. DraftKings, according to public statements and court filings reported by the Iowa Capital Dispatch, said it acted properly under its house rules. Those rules included provisions about minimum holes required for certain bets to stand. 72 holes. That was the standard. This one ended at 54. The sportsbook's position was straightforward. The conditions of the wager were not met under the posted rules. No payout. Stake returned. $14.2 million evaporated back into the digital ether. I have lost bets before. Most gamblers have. I once missed a 3-leg parlay because a backup kicker shanked an extra point in the fourth quarter of a game nobody outside the county was watching. I still carry that one around like a personal insult. Now imagine how that scales to 14 million. That's a family reunion story. Maybe the old man even comes back with endless bottles of milk. As expected, the Iowa bettor filed suit. According to coverage in outlets like The Independent and Sports Litigation Alert, he alleged that the sportsbook wrongfully denied winnings. The argument rested on interpretation, whether the tournament being declared official should have satisfied the wager. Golf, you see, can be declared official after 54 holes. If the PGA Tour recognizes a winner, the record books show a champion. Prize money is distributed. The trophy doesn't come with an asterisk. So in the bettor's view, a completed tournament, even if shortened, was still a completed tournament. DraftKings countered that its rules for certain markets required a full 72 holes. Without that, the bet was void. Clean, mechanical, contractual. That word, contractual, tends to drain the romance out of a story. But somewhere between voided and acted properly, there's a man who watched a number climb to 8 figures and then watched it disappear. It's easy to treat this like a technical dispute, and in court that's largely what it becomes. Clauses, definitions, screenshots entered into evidence. But I keep picturing the moment before the storm, the quiet confidence that must have settled in when the final leg started looking real. The way you start calculating in your head, even if you tell yourself not to. Mortgage paid off, parents taken care of, maybe a place by the water. I've known gamblers who start pricing boats before halftime. The lawsuit, first filed in Iowa State Court and later moved to federal court, argued that the sportsbook's actions violated consumer protection principles and breached the agreement as understood by the bettor. DraftKings maintained that its posted house rules were clear, accessible, and binding, including provisions tied to minimum holes and timing of wagers. Public statements from the company emphasized consistency, that rules exist to govern all wagers, not just the large ones, that applying them selectively would undermine the integrity of the platform. Integrity is a word folks in gambling circles like to lean on. They have to. The whole thing only works because people believe the wheel's fair and the software isn't playing favorites. If a roulette wheel tilts a degree too far, somebody notices. If an algorithm misprices a line, somebody screenshots it. If a payout doesn't land when expected, word travels. In this case, the integrity question cut both ways. To the bettor, the integrity of a wager meant honoring the result recognized by the sport itself. To the sportsbook, integrity meant enforcing the pre-written conditions that governed how that wager was structured. In another era, you'd have argued across a counter in a smoky room, somebody's tie loosened, somebody's voice low. Maybe a pit boss would have stepped in, voice booming but firm. Today, it's emails, app notifications, corporate statements, and then, inevitably, a lawsuit. Two interpretations staring at each other across a table. $14 million in the middle. I've spent enough time around gambling to know that large numbers distort perspective. They make ordinary disagreements feel epic. They turn small print into scripture. But there's also a human thread here that doesn't vanish under legal analysis. Imagine explaining that swing to someone who doesn't gamble. Yeah, a 14 million coming. Then it rained. It sounds like folklore, like a tall tale told by a drunk at closing time. And yet it's documented. Court filings, news reports dated August 2025, statements on the record. The tournament officials didn't wake up intending to effect a parlay in Iowa. They were watching lightning. They were protecting players. They were following golf protocol. Folks will pick a side. They always do. To declare the bettor reckless or the sportsbook heartless. But life in these gray areas rarely offers clean villains. The bettor placed a legal wager under publicly posted odds. The sportsbook offered those odds under publicly posted rules. Both likely believed they were operating inside a fair system. But when the weather shortened the tournament, the system's seams showed. I think about how often gamblers assume that if the sport recognizes a winner, the bet must stand. That feels intuitive. If the trophy is awarded, why wouldn't the wager pay? But sportsbooks write specific conditions for a reason. Markets are priced based on expected structures. A 72-hole tournament carries different volatility than a 54-hole sprint. Weather shifts probabilities. Shorter events compress opportunity. Technically, it makes sense. Emotionally, it doesn't feel that way at all. He had it, and then he didn't. There's a special kind of silence that follows a voided bet. It isn't the same as losing. Losing has a final score, a missed putt, a number that never lands. You can point to the moment it slipped away. A void feels administrative, like someone erased the chalkboard. The lawsuit sought recognition of that erased chalk. DraftKings' defense leaned again on consistency, that allowing the wager to stand despite the rules would create uneven treatment, that rules applied across the board protect the ecosystem. In coverage by the Iowa Capital Dispatch, the company stated it acted properly. The phrasing is corporate, measured, no gloating, no apology, just policy. Meanwhile, the story traveled. $14.2 million has gravity, and somewhere in Iowa, a man who once watched that number flicker on his phone waited to see how a judge would interpret the rain. Modern gambling lives at the mercy of invisible contingencies, weather patterns tracked by satellites, server logs time-stamped to the second, rule books updated in quiet revisions nobody reads until it matters. Most bettors never read the sections about abandoned events. They trust that if their side wins, the app will do the rest. It's easier to trust the system when you're arguing over $50. It becomes complicated at 8 figures. I've known old-timers who say the only safe bet is the one you never place, and they say it while holding a ticket. Because the truth is, gambling has always been about uncertainty layered on uncertainty. You're not just betting on performance, but on unforeseen conditions, on health, on referees, on weather systems forming 3 states away. In this case, the storm soaked more than the fairways. It also got into the paperwork. The legal process now moves slower than a golf round. Motions filed, responses drafted, arguments framed around interpretation. It may take months, even years, for a final resolution to settle. But the story has already carved its place in gambling lore. Not because someone hit a $14 million ticket, because someone almost did. That almost carries weight. Clean wins fade fast. Almost doesn't. When you hear about someone cashing a massive ticket, it feels distant, lucky, mythic. And when you hear about someone watching a fortune vanish over a technicality tied to rain clouds, it feels closer than a clean win ever could. Unsettling, like something that could happen in the space between refreshes. And maybe that's why this case resonates beyond Iowa. It touches the quiet fear every bettor has when they scroll past the house rules. What did I miss? I imagine that Iowa man still watches golf. Maybe he studies radar more closely now. Maybe he reads the rule book the way some folks read scripture. Or maybe he just remembers the afternoon when $14.2 million sat in his palm for a moment, warm, unreal, before dissolving back into numbers. The court will eventually say something definitive, but even after the legal dust settles, the image remains. A man at home, a tournament cut short at 54 holes, an app balance that briefly suggested a different life. Then a notification, voided. I don't know how this lawsuit ends. What I do know is that stories like this travel quietly. They linger, like thunder rolling off in the distance. And sometimes, that's enough to settle an 8-figure wager. There are other gambling stories worth remembering. Some of them even end happily. If you're still here, pull up a chair. The house never closes.